Hello, everybody. Welcome to today's show. My name is Spencer Walsh. Thank you so much for joining us here today. Ladies and gentlemen, it is becoming increasingly clear Joe Biden has no plan to resolve what is going on in Ukraine at the moment. He is hosting right now the Swedish Prime Minister in an attempt to try and get him into NATO. And it's like, dude, what about the actual war that's going on down a little bit down near south? You know, you could add as many people into NATO as you want. I don't think Russia's going to start attacking Sweden anytime soon. You still have tons of death, tons of bloodshed going on pretty much unchecked by the United States right now in Ukraine. We'll get into that. Also, a big controversy for the left, and especially the DSA, has developed that is taking everyone by storm. The question, whether or not to expel what is, in my opinion, one of the more active DSA local politicians up in Massachusetts. I'll break it down and get into it. Also, Mondaire Jones, the former candidate for the 17th district, who, you know, really interesting story, was essentially bullied out of his seat by Sean Patrick Maloney of the DNC. He wanted to run there in the Hudson Valley in New York. He lost to a Republican and essentially handed the Democrats the House. A big loss for him. But now Mondaire's back. We'll tell you what to expect from him. And also, we will take a look at a new big clip from the English Labour Party. All right, yeah, so really interesting situation developing here at the White House. Joe Biden is currently meeting with Prime Minister Ulf Kristersson of Sweden at the White House, as both men are hoping for the Nordic nations' swift acceptance into NATO. But that looks highly unlikely, and that issue threatens to disrupt the alliance's planned show of unity against Russia next week at a NATO summit in Vilnius, Lithuania. The problem facing Biden and Kristersson is President Recep Tayyip Erdogan of Turkey. Yeah, you know where he is. He is reelected. He is feeling his oats a little bit, and he has blocked Sweden's membership bid, saying Sweden harbored Kurdish exiles and refugees affiliated with the Kurdish Workers' Party, which Turkey considers a terrorist group. For those of you who do not know, the Turks are essentially this kind of nation within a nation, an ethnic group that has really been pushed out by especially the current Turkish regime, and has been quite brutal to them, and really violated their civil rights, attacked them many times, and a lot of refugees have gone all over the world, including to Sweden. So, in a statement, though, the White House said that Biden and Kristersson, I keep wanting to call him Christofferson, but he is Kristersson. They would reaffirm their view that Sweden should join NATO as soon as possible. So the issue is a pretty big deal for NATO, which is loath to show signs of internal division at its annual summit, particularly as the war in Ukraine grinds on. Sweden broke from decades of neutrality following the Russian invasion of Ukraine last year by seeking to join NATO. Erdogan has also invested himself deeply in the matter, having long insisted Western nations do not take his concerns about Kurdish terrorism seriously enough. Pretty much, let's be real here. It's not really about for Erdogan, it may be about the Kurds, but the bigger problem here is not really about the Kurds. They're going to continue to cause problems for Erdogan and continue to be oppressed by Erdogan. But the problem is, I think much more accurately, much more, realistically, is the situation with regards to NATO, because NATO, Finland, I think, is already joined. Sweden is trying to do the same thing. NATO is expanding as a political force right when really it should be declining. You have Russia, who everyone thought in the beginning of this, like, we need to build up NATO to stand up to Russia. Well, it's becoming increasingly clear Russia is not a power, and we've talked about the history of this as well on Hidden History. Russia is not a power that is really that strong. We saw some of the really internal chaos, internal dissonance with the Prigozhin coup, and really what we see is a country that is not by any stretch ready to, or even capable of, even if they wanted to, gear up for some sort of long-term Cold War style conflict where there continues to be a some sort of conflict, whether it be a cold or hot war on the Ukrainian border. But that's the appropriate response to if there was a situation like that developing would be to build up NATO, to make NATO more of a unified political force, coherent around the United States, exactly what the United States did way back when in the Cold War. But let's be real, that's what's going on right now, even though there is no Russia that is set up to fight a long-term war on the Ukrainian border. But let's look at the other side here. The United States is absolutely set up to fight a long-term war on the Ukrainian border. They have, they need another kind of pipe, another source to put all of their, surplus military equipment to. What better source than Ukraine? And if you want to continue the Ukraine war, and if you're not really that concerned, let's be real, about putting this thing, in the dustbin of history, thank goodness, it's something we should really all want to do, we should really all try to do, given that it is really an awful, awful situation that has just been the cause of death, cause of destruction, cause of lives ruined all throughout that region. It should be something that you, if you're any kind of good person, want to care about ending as soon as possible and with a as decisive turn for the Ukrainians as possible. And we all know, there is no realistic scenario where they are going to get all the way to Moscow. I just do not see it happening by any stretch. I think it's certainly, possible they could get some serious wins, but we saw a almost coup-like situation for a good 28 hours where essentially troops pulled back from the front and Ukraine made no advances in this counteroffensive. Yeah, and by the way, have you heard generally about this counteroffensive? Because I have not. It has been all quiet on the Eastern Front for the Ukrainians, and it is not a good sign because, as much as disheveled as Russia looks and as unserious as Russia looks as a country in terms of, in terms of continuing this war here, I think it's really, really clear Ukraine is not equipped by any major stretch. You can give them all the weapons you want, but strategy-wise, and really, frankly, results-wise, they have not been putting up in any way any kind of convincing results that can in any way hint to a long-term push against anything. In terms of the Russians, they have not taken this counteroffensive opportunity. They've been loaded up with Western weapons, and they just have not done the job. So, they're definitely strong enough to fight, but their interest is obviously to preserve their country, is to keep fighting and not really to resolve things in a peaceful way. The United States, what they should be doing, this is the bottom line here, what the United States should be doing is stepping in, saying, you know what, this has gone on long enough. We've supported you. We've given you weapons. We've allowed you to take some of the territory back. And it sucks that you got to lose all this stuff. But at the end of the day, we need to come around the table with Russia. We need to negotiate this. We need to put this to an end. Otherwise, we're not going to launch a full invasion for nuclear purposes, which would be one thing if they were to do that, which they're not going to do. We need to come to the negotiated settlement that benefits you the most. And if they aren't able to do that, I think the calculus that we're clearly seeing from the Biden administration is why not more war? Why not keep the engines of production, of military production, going as strong as they possibly can? So why not just expand NATO, antagonize Russia, and essentially put all of its border nations and all of the nations that border the border nations as close to the West as possible to antagonize Russia and keep this thing going and make it as least likely, as unlikely as possible that Russia will ever come around the table. So that seems to be what is going on at the moment. Biden hosting Sweden, Swedish Prime Minister, so we'll see how that goes. But after this, we go on to our next story. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for listening and supporting Newsflash. We now have a brand new way for you to be heard if you want, whether a text message or a audio message. Please, no video messages. I really just do not think that's necessary. We have a new feedback box open for you. Ladies and gentlemen, it is officially open. SWRN702@gmail.com. Send a text message, send a voice message of no more than 30 seconds via the voice memos function. Either of those two options, and we will 100%, not going to find this guarantee anywhere else. We're going to play it on the show, listen to what you have to say, and it literally could be about anything. Well, if it's inappropriate, we won't play it, but it could be about anything. Thank you so much. This is my thank you to all the listeners who have stuck out with us and want to have their own voice in the show. SWRN702@gmail.com is the address. All right, ladies and gentlemen, a very interesting story as we continue to cover the left. The Democratic Socialists of America, one of the biggest organizations on the left, has been in a bit of conversation. There's been a little bit of drama, a little bit of a intrigue recently, as they have had a bit of a nationwide decline in members. I think they've lost, 15,000 members, something like that, as of last count on a national basis. They're still have pretty strong, somewhere around tens of thousands of members for sure, in the high tens of thousands of members, but it is not as high as it used to be maybe in the peak of the Trump administration, early Biden administration, etc., which is very interesting and discussion within itself. But again, it brings to question, what type of people do you want to have in DSA? How stringent do you want to be with your rules, requirements? And A, what can we do to recruit new members? And B, really, what do we do with the members who maybe aren't doing everything they're supposed to, especially elected officials? And one of them who's been in a bit of a subject to a bit of scrutiny has been Mike Connolly of the Boston DSA. Mike Connolly, probably one of the most progressive statewide politicians, as I'm relatively familiar with the Massachusetts state politics. Mike Connolly is a state representative for the 26th district in Cambridge and Somerville. He says he's an attorney, activist, and renter, a proud progressive Democrat and DSA member. He is probably representing, if you're talking about Cambridge and Somerville, that is the area, not quite Harvard, because Harvard is pretty south in Cambridge, but you're talking about North Cambridge, it's like, Lesley University, and then maybe a little bit into Tufts. I don't know if he's actually the representative for Tufts. I don't think so. But he is in a part of the world that I happen to know pretty well. And I followed him. I followed some of the work that he's done. He has been very, very active on some of these big issues. And the question is, they are now considering to expel him at the moment, which really, really surprised me, because at least from my side of view, I've seen him being very active and sometimes challenging the government in terms of renting and stuff like that, especially housing there. That is, again, put it in perspective. You got universities and people who just are fresh out of university. It is probably one of the most left-wing places in the country. I think Somerville has almost a majority of socialists on the city council. It is, an incredibly, incredibly left-wing place there. They do struggle a bit with building some of the affordable housing. They're pushing now, they're really pushing for rent control. You got a whole host of queer people there. It is a very, very left-wing, not I would say Democrat. I would say really left-wing place. You could really tell it. You could see it all around you. It's working class roots, but definitely more gentrified. So it kind of, again, the fresh out of college type of people, the people in college, make up really a lot of that population. A lot of young people, young families, things like that. And it really was quite surprising to see Mike Connolly getting put in this situation. So let's see what he had to say. And I think it is he makes a good point, is that the DSA is not really in the position to turn down new members. They shouldn't be, or really expel old ones. And I generally tend to agree with that. And I think you should always be a very national, very democratic organization, which DSA undoubtedly is. And you should always have the ability to expel people that you think are, or a Democratic majority think are hurting or hindering the organization in any way, because then, you don't really have an organization if you can't really do that and control people. You just end up like the Progressive Caucus in the House. which is just anyone and everyone could be a Progressive Caucus member. But what you do have is, I think you got to have the threshold to be quite high, especially in position of DSA, especially where it's an elected official, somebody who has done some pretty big work, some pretty good work for the DSA in the past. So let's see what they are going and saying. This is from the Boston DSA here. Last week, more than a dozen Boston DSA members in good standing submitted to us, the local coordinating committee, motion to expel Mike Connolly from DSA. So Sunday, July 23rd, is when they're going to have a vote. This guy's state representative for, again, the Somerville and Cambridge areas up there. Very, very left-wing part of the country. So some of the charges that they are saying, so failure to engage with the chapter's electoral endorsement process since 2016. You look at that one, I mean, again, a lot of these are just, he's not been as active of a member as he should have been, which hopefully, again, maybe this expulsion push, if he survives it, will allow him to kind of get in better standing, be a little bit more active in terms of endorsing people, which I think, I think that's totally a fair charge. You got to be an active member of the organization. Does that mean it's warning expulsion? I don't think so. I think expulsion, especially for elected officials, expulsions should come when you are actively working against DSA policy goals. You turn your back on something major. Say vote to send weapons to Israel or something like that. If you're nationwide, who could that be? I don't know. Jamal Bowman. But anyway, you are. This is somebody who has been, relatively good in that, but just again, someone who's maybe who hasn't taken any real anti-DSA type of votes from my perspective, from what I've seen. I may be wrong, but has just, again, not been as active. So yeah, this is the first charge: failure to engage with the chapter's electoral endorsement process since 2016, endorsing, materially supporting, and making public statements praising politicians and political actors who are fundamentally opposed to socialist reforms, endorsing Christine Barber over a DSA candidate in 2020. Okay, I think that is something that, that is a very worthy consideration. Okay, you right off the bat, if you're endorsing somebody who is over a DSA candidate, I think that is very suspect. There's endorsing Kevin Honan and Maura Healey. Again, not the end of the world, but if you're someone at DSA, you don't have to endorse them. I mean, none of this I think is really, except for maybe the endorsing over someone. That could be, like some sort of suspension or a censure or something like that. He used a DSA group chat, that of the Cambridge neighborhood group, to solicit canvassers for Lydia Edwards' Senate campaign. He supported Ron Mariano for House Speaker, praised Ed Augustus for the former city manager for Worcester, who championed corporate giveaways and housing policy, which led to great amounts of gentrification and displacement. Endorsed Somerville City Councilor Matthew McLaughlin, who's been openly hostile to DSA's program and its members, and who has taken developer money. Public statements and legislative actions, which are substantial disagreement with the political platform on housing for all, which is a big, big, big issue, probably one of the biggest issues in that part of the world. Cambridge and Somerville, big housing crisis. Rents are incredibly high, especially with all the off-campus students in Harvard, and it tops as well with the universities. They are driving up rents in a big way. He promoted Landlords for Affordable Housing Group. Again, maybe a little bit stupid, but that seems like to me a bunch of online people who are just like, you can't promote this certain Twitter group. Public statements in favor of fair rate of return, just because they're landlords, which seems a little bit stupid. Public statements in favor of fair rate of return operating income to landlords. Publicly advocated for a milquetoast version of rent stabilization that's out of step with the chapter's members have organized for. Again, it's definitely some not good stuff, I would say. That some things that are make him not look good. Definitely some things that are for sure cause for censure. Or even suspension. I think the endorsing thing is really not great at all. But you do have to be real at the end of the day and say, do we want to have a DSA guy? Can we work with him? Can we make him better to our interests, or is he actively against us? I think if someone's actively not going to work with you, if you try and call someone in instead of calling them out, and they just, say, flip up the double bird, then I think that's time for some expulsion. I think this should be a kind of wake-up call, a warning. Maybe I think an expulsion is too far, but it would be it'd be interesting to see how he responds to this and really how he does. So let's take a look at let's see his response. So he says he helped lead efforts to pass the nation's strongest eviction and foreclosure moratorium in the worst of the pandemic. Housing and public ownership of public utilities legislation is what he's introduced. He's co-founded the Housing for All Legislative Caucus and won the approval of numerous budget amendments to bring improvements to our district, from street safety upgrades and unarmed alternatives to policing, to open space enhancements, fossil fuels he's done. He said he showed up for meetings, participated in national calls with elected officials, brainstormed and supported campaigns, and always agreed to meet DSA members and leadership for small group or larger public conversations anytime upon any request. So it does not seem to me like he is really it doesn't seem to me that he's, absolutely addressing some of, just saying, I care about democracy. Democracy entails valuing the concerns and preferences and interests and input of all the voters and all the constituents and residents of any given district or jurisdiction. Essentially saying that they want him to, be a purity test. So again, in my opinion here, not the greatest response. Definitely highlighting some of his work, highlighting that he's kind of open to meet, and he seems to be, pretty pissed off that he got this letter here. But again, I hope, this is why, again, the left will never win. They'll never have real good organizations that aren't really labor based. Because let's be real here. All that really needs to happen is this dude needs to come in and say, I'll be more active. My bad. I won't endorse against DSA members. Because if you want to be in DSA, that's just not something you should be doing. And I will not be kind of completely, because he kind of skirts a little bit. He talks about, I need to work with people I need to work with people in leadership to get things done. I need to get things done. Again, those are probably some of the most spurious charges that the DSA levels on him, but talking about endorsing people over DSA members, and some of the things on housing and things that he has said, I think seems to carry a little bit more weight. And interestingly, those are the things that he has not responded to. But it is, if he admits that and DSA is gracious enough to accept it, which are two very uncertain propositions in the world of left-wing politics, I think we'll be in a much better place. So hopefully that comes to pass. All right. We move on to our next story, and we got a pretty interesting one. Another kind of political representative looking to get back in it is a remarkable story with Mondaire Jones here. Mondaire Jones is the former representative for the New York 17th District, which is essentially kind of the northern suburbs of New York City. And he was a representative for 2 years. Then in redistricting, the court kind of screwed the Democrats out of a gerrymander, and then and kind of condensed the districts a little bit. They had to lose one district, and that one district that was on the chopping block just happened to be the district of Sean Patrick Maloney, who had a district that was kind of far north New York suburbs, and then kind of the beginning of upstate New York, essentially. So Sean Patrick Connolly, is a higher up, bigwig DNC corporatist that was able to come in and say, I'm running the 17th seat, which is slightly to the south, much safer. Sean Patrick Connolly previously been kind of like a frontline member because he is right where New York starts to get really Republican as you go north up from the city. And that in and of itself was a very interesting situation. Because Maloney comes down and says, I am going to primary Mondaire Jones. Mondaire Jones essentially gets freaked out, goes to run in a seat in southern Manhattan, comes in like fourth, and really steals vote from another really good progressive, and probably a more good progressive, a better progressive, Yulan New in New York City, and hands a seat to a former Levi's jeans heir, Dan Goldman, which was it was very unfortunate to see. And then the best part of it all, Sean Patrick Maloney wins that primary easily, and then goes on against this other left-winger, Alessandro Biaggi, formerly of the New York State Senate, and then goes on to lose to a Republican, essentially handing the House to the Republicans. Mike Lawler is currently representing what is probably a Biden plus 12 area. It's really pretty laughable. So Mondaire Jones trying to get back in it for the Hudson Valley today. He announced his campaign. Kind of saw it coming. He was really clearly pretty pissed, but now seems to be trying to get back in action here. So let's see what he has to say in his announcement video.
I was lucky to grow up in Rockland County. Raised by a young single mom who, like so many incredible women throughout this district, still had to work multiple jobs to make ends meet. My grandfather was a janitor, and my grandmother cleaned homes. People here invested in me and helped me find my way. I made it from East Ramapo Public Schools all the way to Harvard Law. Growing up, I didn't see people like me in Congress. Then I was elected to represent the same people whose homes I watched my grandmother clean.
Mondaire has meant that someone really pays attention to Rockland County again. Gun violence is a uniquely American problem. And it's frightening to be a parent and know that I could send my kid off to school and never see them again. Mondaire has been a champion for keeping people safe.
People here know me. I stand up to Republicans trying to overthrow our democracy and take away the freedom to have an abortion, even as I push members of my own party to fight harder for working people.
So I've worked in law enforcement in the Hudson Valley for just about 40 years. We do not get the funding they get in the city. Mondaire Jones listened and funded the police.
Mondaire got stuff done. The roads and bridges around here need help. He got a lot of money to fix them up. That puts people to work.
Some people in my party got mad at me when I tried to block members of Congress from getting rich off the stock market, or when I said no to taking money from corporations. I have never been Washington's choice, because I stand up to corruption.
The funding that Mondaire provided will absolutely keep communities safer and really ultimately save lives. He's the kind of guy I want on my side.
Because he stands up for his principles, he votes with his convictions, and he puts us first.
Most people in Washington didn't grow up like me. They have no idea what it's like to struggle. We got to get Washington back on the side of working people. I know we can do better. For me, this is personal.
So Mondaire Jones giving it another shot. How about that? Going back to Congress there. So honestly, I don't know what to think about it. I think it is kind of, definitely politically, it's a very, very smart ad. There's no question about that. He does kind of hit all the right notes. So even a little bit, I funded the police type of thing, which I think is, in terms of what is going to be a predominantly white, definitely a lot parts of it wealthy, the exact sort of people in the Democratic base who really got freaked out by the kind of defund the police movement. So I think it's a pretty good situation. I think he's just kind of on the rightward edge of what I would vote for. Getting a little personal here. I am currently, this may surprise you as I do a show about politics 3 times a week, but I'm actually not registered to vote. I've never registered to vote. I've never voted before. I could have voted in the 2022 midterm elections, but given what happened with the primary, what happened with the general election, I actually vote in this district. I would vote in this district. So I was just very, very much not feeling it. I was like, whatever. But yeah, Mondaire Jones is someone who I think for the most part will be a pretty reliable vote on all kind of Democratic leftist things like, the Medicare for all, the canceling the student debt, ending some of the wars and things like that. I think that is going to be a very, very big thing. Just have that vote, have that there. Because again, it's not about your personality as far as, do I like this guy? At least for me. It's as someone who, wants to see, and I think this should be hopefully for all the people listening as well, if you want to see a certain left-wing political agenda, if you want to see someone who's going to be going to fight to make things better for working class people. All you need to know is, does he have personality-wise? Like, all you need to know is, personality-wise, does he have the cojones, essentially, to bring it to a lot of these people, to stand up, to get the fire under people's belly, and also, does he have the cojones to kind of deal with some of the pressure that people might want to put on him if he takes a vote that people don't like, et cetera, et cetera. So it's, again, a pretty big deal to see him getting back there. He was a member of the Congressional Caucus. He supported Medicare for All, Green New Deal, early efforts to cut funding for the police, but ultimately voted for police funding in 2021 bipartisan infrastructure bill. He also, and again, this makes more sense than any other kind of quote unquote progressive, whatever you want to call him, who voted to fund the Iron Dome. He does actually have a very large portion. Rockland County is Hasidic Jewish, so that could have played a role. Not saying I'm a big fan of it, not saying I am 100% endorsing it or supporting it in any way. I'm absolutely not, but he, I think, is definitely someone who could be listened to on this, or could be convinced to and talked to, as opposed to someone like Sean Patrick Maloney, who would just tell you to F the hell off. So Jones said in a Wednesday news interview for News 12, he regretted his decision to forego a primary challenge against Maloney in 2020. In terms of challenges, speaking of challenges, the bottom line on this here is, it's very good to see him running. He is not a perfect vote, but he would be a better vote than almost 99% of all the people in Congress, all the people, really only like the hardcore squad, people like Cori Bush, Omar Tlaib, would be better than him, I would say. As far as challenging and if he is able to win, this is something. Biden carried the 17th district by 10 points in 2020. As far as being able to win, is something he should be able to beat Mike Lawler pretty easily, running kind of a socially liberal, economically kind of progressive campaign, talking about, challenging Washington, taking people, gun violence is an issue a lot of people care about in that area. It's a very kind of upper class liberal issue. He's hitting kind of all the right notes. Unless he has another kind of serious Democratic primary challenger, I think he will probably pretty easily beat Mike Lawler, who's the current Republican representative, and be back in Congress relatively soon. I think that'll be definitely a good thing, a net positive, not an absolute positive, but a net positive for the left, and definitely for that part of New York in general. All right, we now move to our last story, one of my favorite and also least favorite topics of the UK Labour Party. All right, very, very interesting clip that I wanted to bring to your attention. As you may or may not be aware, we've kind of seen this really epic struggle in the Labour Party, very similar to the Democratic Party, between the left wing and the right wing. For 2015 to 2019, the left wing was in power, and you're going to see here John McDonnell, who was the deputy to Jeremy Corbyn, who is the kind of the left-wing faction of the Labour Party, who's in power from 2015 to 2019. And ever since 2019, they have had a new leader who essentially really, and it was a remarkable act that I think does not get really nearly the attention it deserves, kind of portrayed himself as a member of the left wing, then ruthlessly turned around and purged the left wing for various very kind of spurious charges from the Labour membership, until essentially there's a drastically reduced membership, talking tens of thousands of left-wingers expelled from the membership rolls of the Labour Party. And for a lot of it, and some of these members include MPs, and one of those MPs was the former leader, Jeremy Corbyn, for essentially not agreeing to the smear that the the right wing of the party, including the current leader, who goes by the name of Keir Starmer, tried to place on him, essentially that he is anti-Semitic, and that the fact that he refuses to acknowledge all of the pain and the anti-Semitism that he's caused. As I'm sure you can guess, he is just a really vocal critic, one of the only vocal critics of the Israeli government in British politics. For not agreeing to his, the ruthless anti-Semitism that he possesses, or not agreeing to that claim that he possesses the ruthless anti-Semitism, they have decided they did decide a few years back to kick him out of the party, and he will no longer, essentially, he can't get the Labor nomination for his seat that he's represented for 40 years, and now will have to run as an independent against both a Labor candidate and a conservative candidate in his kind of safe Labor seat. But anyway, all throughout this time, due to really fear of losing the whip, is essentially what it's called, is when you have to, you will not, it's essentially the party coming down on high and saying that you cannot run as a Labor member or as a Labor MP for your seat in Parliament. They have really been quite silent about it until now. This is John McDonnell on the BBC Newsnight with a pretty strong quote that really pissed off a lot of some of the worst people in the British English Labour Party. Let's take a look at what he had to say.
What I'm saying is, I think what he's allowed to happen is a right-wing faction become drunk with power and use devices within the party almost on a search and destroy of the left. They seem to be more interested in destroying the presence of the left in the party than getting a Labour government. We all want a Labour government. We want a broad church party. We want to build the enthusiasm before the election, but we need the commitment when we're in government, when times get rough. And that's when you draw upon all elements of the party. You can't let one faction dominate that way and alienate others.
Yeah, so that is a
what I'm saying
stronger but relatively milquetoast response from John McDonnell, who's been up until this point pretty much silent. And for that, he has been yelled at, he has been whinged at essentially from a lot of these people, being, we all want a Labour government. So the people are just freaking out about this, for him just daring to criticize after essentially what was, as I'm sure you can guess, a 4-year sabotage campaign. Again, there needs to be a lot more of this stuff coming out. And the main thing that John McDonnell here gets wrong is that it's not like he's allowing it. He is leading it. He is, he is in full support. He is in full endorsement of kicking the left wing out of the party. And what's really sad here is seeing the Labour left completely in a state of absolute weakness, letting it, just being, please be nice to us. Don't allow us to not stay in the party. Please, sir. And again, they are just being completely laughed out of the room. McDonnell, though, seems to begin to find some backbone in this clip. Here's to hoping he has more of it. All right, we're back on Friday. It's Newsflash.